This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to make some updates and upgrades to our Sisay Weatherlight Captain Enchantments-Matter EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Today we're going to update and upgrade our Sisay Weatherlight Captain Enchantments-Matter deck. We've got some cards going in, which means we've got some cards coming out. So let's kick things off right away with the first card going in. It is the Composer of Spring. We've got a 1/3 Satyr Bard for 1 and a green mana, and it has the Constellation mechanic. Whenever an enchantment enters a battlefield under our control, and there will be many enchantments entering our side of the battlefield in this deck. When it happens, we may put a land card from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. If we control 6 or more enchantments, which we should have very little trouble accomplishing, then instead of putting a land into play, we may put a creature or land in from our hand onto the battlefield tapped. This is a remarkable creature for any Enchantments-Matter builds. This helps with ramp. This helps to flood our side of the battlefield with even more creatures. And keep in mind, we have so many enchantment creatures in this build that will trigger Composer of Spring if it goes onto our side of the battlefield. So imagine a scenario where we have Composer of Spring in play and at least 6 enchantments. Then we can put an enchantment into play. We could put another enchantment into play. We can continue triggering that, and the only limitation will be the number of cards in our hand. And luckily for us, we have the 98 of this build, which is inundated with enchantment-specific card draw. Composer of Spring instantly becomes one of the best cards in the 99 of this deck. With this Satyr Bard going into the build, coming out is going to be Hana, Ship's Navigator. So here with Hana, we have the ability to bring an enchantment or artifact card from our graveyard to our hand through its activated ability. It's a 1 per, so we can do it during our turn once or during 1 round of turns. The only problem with this when stacked up with Composer of Spring is that the Composer of Spring allows us to really impact the battlefield through its Constellation mechanic, where Hana, whatever it's going to be, we'll go with Hana. I know I said Hana earlier, but that was a mistake and I'm not going to edit it. So we're going to go with Hana. So Hana's going to bring it to our hand, and it's going to cost us mana to do so, where the Composer of Spring over there is just going to allow us to put it right into play from our hand. From an overall resource and board state development perspective, there really isn't much of a conversation. Hana is clearly inferior to the Composer of Spring. Card number 2 heading into this build as a update and upgrade, it is the Nyxborn Behemoth. Here we have one of those aforementioned enchantment creatures. It's a 10/10 with trample for 10 and 2 green mana. However, this spell costs X generic mana less to cast, where X is the total mana value of non-creature enchantments we control. This should only ever cost us 2 green mana when you look at the number of enchantments that are in this build that are not creatures. We should have very little trouble getting this into play for just 2 green mana. Keep in mind, although there are no mention of them in this particular video, we have every shrine in the 99 of this build. Yes, some of those are the enchantment creature shrines, but not all of them are creatures. So we also have an additional ability here with the Behemoth. We can pay 1 and a green mana and sacrifice another enchantment to give Nyxborn Behemoth indestructible until end of turn. A 10/10 trampler for 2 green mana that could be indestructible by paying an insignificant 1 and a green mana and sacrificing one of our many enchantments. That almost makes Nyxborn Behemoth a must-include in any build that is centered or focused on enchantments. With this beast going into the 99 of this Sisay deck, the card it's replacing is Thassa, God of the Sea. Now here we are losing 1 enchantment creature for another. Although Thassa has indestructible at all times, we can make the Behemoth indestructible as well. Thassa is 2 and a blue always, where the Nyxborn Behemoth should only be 2 green mana ever. So and of course, Thassa is only going to be a creature if our devotion to blue is at least 5. And of course, to factor in devotion, we count the blue mana symbols on the casting costs of permanents we control. So at the beginning of our upkeep, Thassa lets us scry 1, which is okay from a card advantage standpoint, and then paying 1 on the blue mana gives target creature we control unblockable until end of turn. Well, let's face it, I'd rather have a 10/10 trampler than something that cannot be blocked for the same mana value of 2. 1 in a blue with Thassa, 1 in a green with the Nyxborn Behemoth, but let's face it, that 1 in a green just makes it indestructible on top of the trample. Yeah, I think that Thassa is not as good as the Behemoth in this build, and therefore that makes it a very easy swap in and swap out here for MTG Burgeoning. All right, the next card going in, it is, yes, Demon of Fate's Design. Here we have another enchantment creature. We're getting closer and closer to filling out the entirety of the deck with as many potential enchantments as possible. Here we have a 6/6 enchantment creature demon with flying and trample for 4 and 2 black, and once during each of our turns, we may cast an enchantment spell by paying life equal to its mana value rather than its mana cost. So that saves our mana to use in other areas, and we have so many ways to gain peripheral life in this build. Granted, this is not a dedicated life gain build, but I'll tell you, this deck has lots and lots of ways to do that. So with Demon of Fate's Design allowing us to cast one of those enchantments during our turn just by paying life instead of mana value, that helps to flood our side of the battlefield with even more enchantment spells, gives us greater access to our mana resources to use them in other ways. And let's face it, this is also a 6/6 beater in the air for only 6 mana. But we're not even done yet. We can pay 2 and a black and sacrifice another enchantment to give Demon of Fate's Design +X+0 until end of turn, where X is the sacrificed enchantment's mana value. We have a way in which to potentially one-shot an opponent with this demon, because note, we do not have to tap it in order to activate that power-boosting ability. All right, with the demon going in, the card coming out in its place is going to be Mogis, God of Slaughter. Here we have another one of the original Theros gods. This one, of course, from Born of the Gods. A 7/5 indestructible, of course, for 2 in Rakdos colors. And our devotion here is 7 in Rakdos colors, or it's not a creature. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, this creature, Mogis here, will deal 2 damage to that player unless they sacrifice a creature. The problem here with Mogis in a commander build that is not suited for life lost and is not really taking advantage of all that Rakdos could be. If Mogis were a commander, you could build around that ability so much more effectively. It's just being a passive card in the 99 of an enchantment build. Let's face it, that 2 points of life is just not going to do it for each one of those opponents. So as you can see, Mogis is clearly more inferior to Demon of Fate's Design. They're both still enchantments, so we still keep the enchantment synergies available. We just offer a greater bang for our mana investing buck by including the demon over Mogis. All right, the last card going into this Sisay build for this installment of the Up and Up series, it is Boon of the Spirit Realm. Here we have 3 and 2 white for an enchantment, and it also has the Constellation mechanic. Whenever this or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we put a blessing counter on Boon of the Spirit Realm. There should be lots of boon counters on this enchantment. Creatures we control will get +1/+1 for each blessing counter on Boon of the Spirit Realm. I might have said boon counters by mistake. These are blessing counters going on, and each blessing counter is going to give a creature we control +1/+1. This we can consider to be a win condition, particularly because of the number of enchantments that we're going to have flooding our side of the battlefield every one of our turns. With the boon going in, it is going to replace Heliod, God of the Sun. Here we have another enchantment being replaced by another enchantment. Here, Heliod gave creatures we control vigilance. It's a 5/6, and of course it's only a creature if its devotion to white is at least 5. But what we also have here is an improvement on the creature enablement. Heliod only gave our creatures vigilance, where Boon of the Spirit Realm is going to buff their power and toughness so much that it's considered a win condition over this version of Heliod. Yes, it does have that creature token making ability for 2 and 2 white mana, but let's face it, for what Boon of the Spirit Realm gives the 99 of this build, it blows OG Heliod right out of the water. There you have it, MTG some updates and upgrades to our Sisay Enchantment-Matter EDH deck. Let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.